Welcome, friends. Hello, 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 welcome. So happy to have you join us tonight at APS Stamp Chat. We'll get started in just a moment. Let's let our friends file into the room, so to speak. Good evening, bienvenidos. So nice to have you all joining us tonight. Thank you. From around the world, we really appreciate the philatelic community coming together on all the various digital platforms and chats. It's so nice to feel a togetherness and a connectivity through the hobby. Thank you so much. And we have a chat. Hello, hi, Jonathan Topper from Houston. Thanks so much for joining us. Howdy. And as I said, we'll just give a little bit of time just to let our friends roll in. It's so nice to have you all joining us, and we hope that you are well and safe wherever you are. Well, it's 5:31, and I think that we should go ahead and get started with tonight's feature presentation. With that, I'd like to heartily and warmly welcome you. Bienvenidos to Stamp Chat. My name is Heidi Rhodes. Today on Stamp Chat, we welcome Mr. Mauricio Mejia. Mr. Mejia joins us live from Tegucigalpa, the capital of Honduras. Mejia began stamp collecting at age 6 in 1991 and has continued to involve himself in philately ever since. He joined the Honduran Philately Federation in 2001 and is currently serving as secretary and managing the social media for the Federation. Mr. Mejia is the Honduran Commissioner on the World Stamp Shows, including New York 2016, Brasilia 2017, London 2020, which, as we all know, is postponed until 2022, and Philately for 2021. Additionally, Mauricio is a member of the Thematic Philately Commission of the Inter-American Federation of Philately. His philatelic interests include Honduras, all issues since the first in 1865, and Honduran-related flight covers. Today's Stamp Chat is sponsored by the American Philatelic Research Library. If you're an APS member, you're able to borrow materials from the library or request scans, photocopies, or research for all of your philatelic questions. To find out more about the library, visit our webpage at stamplibrary.org. That's stamplibrary.org, and explore all the services we provide to both members and non-members. Now, friends, before we begin, we do have a few housekeeping items to take care of. Today's session is a webinar, and as such, all audio and video of attendees will be muted and turned off respectively throughout the presentation. Please feel free to use the chat box to engage with other attendees and the Q&A box for your questions for our speaker, Mr. Mejia. This session is being recorded and will be made available on the APS YouTube channel. Please note that tonight's presentation is pre-recorded. However, Mr. Mejia is joining us live, and we will read to him as many of the questions as we receive in the Q&A box as time allows. Additionally, Mr. Mejia's slides are numbered, so look for that number on the lower right corner. Please note this slide number if this inspires a question. Okay, and with that, we now present an introduction to Honduran Philately. Thank you so much, Mr. Mejia, for joining us, and we'll get started. Excuse me, friends.
Hello. First of all, I would like to thank the American Philatelic Society for this opportunity. And I really want to thank all of you who are attending this meeting. Okay, today we're going to see a really nice topic, which is the introduction to Honduran Philately. First of all, we're going to mention a little bit about Honduras. Here we have on the left the coat of arms of Honduras. On the center above, the map of Honduras. On the right, our flag. And on the stamp on the bottom, I'm marking where Honduras is located. Because believe it or not, some people don't know where my country is. Okay, we're going to mention some history. During Spanish colonial times, Honduras was a province of the Captaincy General of Guatemala, also known as the Kingdom of Guatemala, which included the present-day nations of Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and the Mexican state of Chiapas. Postal communications appeared since the early years of the Spanish conquest and colonization of these lands. Let's not forget that when the Spanish conquistadors came to the Americas, they were seeking fortune and they had to be in constant communication with their relatives in Spain or with the king. And as soon as a government was formed in the Kingdom of Guatemala, which by the way depended of the viceroyalty of New Spain, now Mexico, there was a constant back and forth of mail to administrate the lands. Here we have some examples of Honduran pre-stamp mail, both during the colonial era or after the independence, or the Republican period, as we call it. On the upper left, we have one of the earliest known letters of Honduras, dated April 13th, 1742. As you can see, it has no postmarks. It only has an inscription on the bottom that says con propio, which is by own. You most likely sent with a servant. But later on, once the postal service evolved, we can see that there were some postmarks applied. For example, we have a Tegucigalpa in red, or on the bottom left, a Danlí postmark, or bottom right, a Comayagua. The interesting of this Comayagua postmark is that it reads franqueado en Comayagua, or postage paid at Comayagua. Let's not forget that during this time, before the postage stamp was introduced, letters were usually paid by the recipient and not by the sender. So in the rare case that a sender actually paid for the service, a special postmark had to be applied. That way, the recipient didn't have to pay again. Here we have two very nice special postmarks, both on the top of each letter. For example, the one on the left, it's a circular postmark with a crown and the letters VF and the number 7. These stand for Viva Fernando VII, or Long Live Ferdinand VII, who was the Spanish king at the beginning of the 19th century, but was imprisoned by Napoleon. Here in the Spanish provinces of the Kingdom of Guatemala, there was a support for King Ferdinand, and many places made postmarks like this one. And that also happened in other parts of New Spain or the viceroyalties in South America. However, some years later, like on the letter on the lower right, we have a postmark that reads Viva la Independencia, or Live Independence. And by the way, today, September 15th, it's the 199th anniversary of Honduran independence. So you can see here that we switch from supporting King Ferdinand to proclaiming independence. And that happened in a very short period of time. Here in Honduras, we have many types of stamps. Not all of them are used at the present day. Here we see a few. Ordinary stamps, semi-postal, air post semi-postal, air post special delivery, air post official, and postal tax. Nowadays, all of our stamps are regularly issued as airmail stamps. Every now and then, an ordinary stamp appears. However, there is no rate difference between an airmail and ordinary mail. All of our international mail is sent by air, and all domestic letters are handled by surface mail. Special delivery no longer exists, and official stamps for government use are no longer in existence. And we have no longer any postal taxes. There are two other types of stamps that we used to have. Actually, one of them still exists, which are the revenues. Revenue stamps are still used in almost every legal document in Honduras. But the one that we no longer have are the telegraph stamps, because we no longer have telegraphic service. Here we see the first stamp issue of Honduras. It was made in the year of 1865. And it consisted of two identical stamps with the face value of 2 reales. And you will notice right now that they are the same. The only thing that changes is the color of the paper. And you wonder why. Most people say that that makes no sense. It does make sense if you consider the following, that the green stamp was primarily used on the parts of Honduras that had silver coins, and the pinkish one circulated in the regions of Honduras that handled copper coins. We believe that this was just for accounting purposes, just to identify where to send each stamp. And that's the theory that has hold the most. Here we see a beautiful stamp pane of the first issue. They were printed, we believe, in Belgium. We are not sure yet the name of the printer or the amount printed. However, we do know that this stamp was sold by stamp dealers in Europe sometime before it even arrived to Honduras. Here we have a large block of the same issue, and we can see some errors that are consistent on each stamp pane. If we see a complete pane, like the one that we just saw on the previous slide, we can identify those errors that I'm showing on the right. Every few rows, those errors repeat themselves. So they're not that hard to find. An interesting fact of this stamp issue is that the mint stamps are relatively cheap. Everyone can get a copy. However, used material or stamps in covers, that's a different story. Here we have some interesting images. For example, image 1 and 5 are cover fragments, which are really hard to find. Images 2 and 3, some stamps with pre-stamped postmarks, that's also quite rare. And images 4 and 6 are for used stamps. On image 6, a reconstruction of a postmark is shown there with the stamp. And as you can see on most of them, the first cancellations used were simply across made with a quill. Here we have 2 of the 4 covers known having the first stamp issue of Honduras. These are extremely valuable pieces, really hard to find. We hope that someday we can discover another cover. It has been years since a new piece with the Honduran first issue has been discovered. The one on the top, sent to Paris, is a cover front, and the one on the bottom, sent to the US, is a complete cover. Extremely hard, extremely valuable pieces, really nice, and only 4 known, as I mentioned before. Soon after the 1865 issue, there was a need for surcharges. We're going to talk a little bit more of surcharges later on. And here we see the designs of the surcharges and how they were applied to the stamps. They were applied with a manual stamp, 1 by 1, a hand stamp, and therefore there are no 2 surcharges identical. An interesting fact is that if you find one of these stamps and the inscription is neat, almost perfect, almost 100% sure that you have a counterfeit in your hands. These surcharges are barely readable. Since they were applied by hand using a hand stamp of poor quality ink, the surcharges are not clear. And so far, we only have record of used examples of used stamps, but we don't have stamps on covers yet. We hope to find one soon. Here we have the first stamp issue of Honduras printed in the US. This is the Morazan issue of 1878. A very nice printing if you compare it with the first issue. These stamps are also hard to find in covers. I'm showing here 2. The stamps in mint condition are not that expensive, but covers are. Then we have the Seebeck issues between 1889 and 1895. I'm going just to mention them briefly. I believe these are one of the most beautiful stamps of Honduras. If you don't know who Seebeck was, he was a printer who supplied stamps for many countries. Actually, he worked for the Hamilton Banknote Company. And he made these arrangements with several postal administrations. His stamps are famous for being very colorful and for making many face values or series that are very long, that have many values in them. Here we have, he made actually a reprint of the Morazan issue, almost identical. The only way to recognize them, sometimes with the color, which you can note some differences. Seebeck's color were more bright. But if you have mint copies in your hands, just flip them and take a look at the gum. Transparent gum are the originals. Yellowish gum are the reprints. And with Seebeck, we have the first postal stationery. On the top, a prepaid envelope with an additional stamp, and on the bottom, a newspaper wrapper. Newspaper wrappers are quite scarce because the paper that they were made on was not very good and they were easily destroyed. Then we have the President Bogran stamps. Here we have him. And on the 2 pesos, 5 pesos, and 10 pesos stamps on the bottom is where we can see the first inverts on Honduran Philately. Actually, the only inverts that we have, legitimate inverts, as you can see on the image on the right. And by now you can see that some of our topics are heads of state. Previously, we had the Morazans, the Francisco Morazan was a patriot, a national hero of Honduras. Here we have General Boglan. Here we have him in postal stationery cards, and we have a regular envelope with a 10 centavo stamp of that issue. In 1892, for the 400th anniversary of the discovery of America, we have the Columbus issue made by Seebeck. And here we have a cover. Interesting fact on this cover is the 1 peso stamp on the right. Covers with the high values of the Seebeck issues are extremely rare. Here, the sender and the recipient of this envelope is the New York and Honduras Rosario Mining Company, which was an important mining company in Honduras, and they had to send a lot of documentations to headquarters in New York. Therefore, they require a lot of postage. Many of the covers with the 1 peso stamps of this era are sent by this company. Here we have in 1893, General Cabañas, who was also a president of Honduras. And in 1895, this is an issue that we call Justice. And here we have a proof of the Cabañas stamps and a postal stationery envelope with an additional 10 cents stamp. Then in 1898, when Honduras revokes Seebeck's contract, we are in need of stamps, and we decide to make them here in Honduras. And we have the first stamps printed in Honduras in 1898, the Presidencial Arias issue with 8 different stamps. And then the Arias were issued in 1896, sorry. And the locomotive stamps issued in 1898. These stamps are quite easy to find. They're not expensive. However, counterfeits are quite common, and the philatelic market is filled with them. This happened to be because when the stamps were originally issued in 1896 and 98, they were only sold at the post office if you had to send a letter. Otherwise, if you just went to the post office and wanted to buy them, they won't sell them to you. That came later on. And philatelic dealers needed to supply the demand of these stamps. Therefore, some of them decided to do some counterfeits. And here we have from the Arias issue, so far we know 4 counterfeits. Some of them are very easy to identify, like a printing that is very, very clear, or the printing was too dark, things like that. Then we have the locomotive stamps, which 5 counterfeits are known. Some of them, like the first, what we call type A, you can notice the counterfeit from a very far distance. You have to compare a original to note that. And once you know how to identify this, it's very easy. And other counterfeits were very clumsy. For example, this was printed 1896 instead of 1898. If you decide to collect Honduras, you will note something if you are getting covers. Most of the covers that you will find out there in the market are commercial covers government letters, or from diplomatic legations or embassies. Finding local covers within Honduras is quite rare. Let's not forget what I mentioned before, that the population was small, not many people knew how to write, and there was no that much need to send letters. And another interesting fact is that here, people didn't have the culture or the spirit of keeping envelopes, of keeping everything. In other countries, people tend to keep their letters in boxes. Here, people open the letters, they throw away the envelope, and that's it. So most of our covers are for mail sent abroad, as you can see here on the examples that I'm showing you. One interesting thing that I should mention right now is that some of our letters have a special postmark that reads Ambulancia Postal, like the one that I'm highlighting here. The Ambulancia Postal, or postal ambulance, is the office on railways. So we have railways on the north coast of Honduras. They had on one of the rail cars, had a little post office on some of them, and they process mail. These postmarks, the one that I'm showing right now on this letter is common, but some Ambulancia Postal rail post office markings are extremely rare. And here we have other covers from Honduras, business covers, like the one on the upper right, government, upper left, and diplomatic on the bottom. Another thing that you will notice in Honduran covers from certain time periods is finding bisected stamps, as you can see here. Although this was not approved by the UPU, this was needed sometimes. For example, here this letter had a rate of 15 cents, and at the post office, they had no 5-cent stamp, no 10-cent, they only had 2-cent stamps, and no 1 cent. So what was done? You have 14 cents on 2 centavos, and the postal clerk took one of those 2 centavos and cut it by half, and it was pasted there. So we have 14 cents and half of a 2 centavos, that's 1 cent. So that's 15 cents. Quite common in small towns as in large cities during some times. That's very interesting on Honduran mail. Honduras is also famous for control marks on stamps. Here we have a control mark that reads permítase. That would be like allow. This was so because stamps had a period on which they were valid for postal use. In this case, we have material from 3 different issues that happened 3 times on the port city of Amapala in the south of Honduras. This port was a little bit isolated from the rest of the country, and the new stamps didn't arrive on time. So what did the postal administration did, or the revenue office did in that time? They had to allow the voided stamps for use. So a hand stamp was applied on the stamp sheets. The only case that you will find a permítase as a cancellation is in postal stationery cards, like the one on the upper right. It's interesting to mention this because there are also many counterfeits of the permítase, because it's quite rare. Some people decided to do some counterfeits, but they use a fake permítase as a postal cancellation. And if you see a cover where the stamp, where the permítase is also on the cover and not only on the stamp, you know it's a fake. And if you also see a permítase on a cover that is not from the city of Amapala, like the one on the bottom, that it has a postmark Amapala, if you see a permítase from any other location, it's a fake one. We have other control marks as well. For example, on the cover on the top, we have that inscription that in Spanish reads TSDC, for Tribunal Superior de Cuentas, which is a government dependency that handle monetary affairs. These stamps had to be overprinted with that mark, most likely because a theft of stamps occurred during that time, and the government had to identify the ones that they still have with the ones that were stolen to prevent its use. So the only ones that were valid for postal usage were the ones with the TS search overprint, I should say overprint. And in that cover, we have another control mark, if you notice, a signature on the stamps, which is quite common on some covers of Honduras during certain times. This signature is a facsimile signature from the revenue administrator. There were many revenue administrators in Honduras, so they apply their signature, their facsimile signature, on the stamps that they had in their possession, just to keep a better control on them. On the small cover on the bottom, we also have a very small facsimile signature on that tiny stamp. These facsimile signatures have been studied quite a lot, and if you have a cover and for some reason you do not have the clear print of the place where it was posted, you can guess or actually identify which revenue administrator had those stamps, and that can give you an idea on where that cover could have been mailed. Here we have some pages of the Scott catalog, and I would like to talk about the surcharges and overprints of Honduras, specifically from the 1910 to 1930 period, which I highlighted in red. And as you can see, Honduras had one surcharge and overprint after another. Even our first airmail stamps, which are on the mark on the right with the arrow, are overprints and surcharges. And we have surcharges on the 30s, 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and even 2010s. Why so many surcharges and overprints? Well, that depends on which period of Honduran history you are looking. For example, between the 1910 to 1930, it was due to political instability and financial problems. After the 1930s, most likely only financial problems. And in both times, we also had the situation that the revenue administration caught fire, and that happened more than once. So, for instance, during the political instability period in Honduras, there were many civil wars or revolts due to political matters. We had only two political parties then, And when a candidate of one party won the election, the losing candidate sometimes made a revolt and tried to overthrow the government. And then when that party ruled, the previous one made a revolt and so on. So we were in constant uprisings during the first quarter of the 20th century. Even there was a siege on the city of Tegucigalpa, and one of the revolutionaries actually got an airplane and bombed Tegucigalpa, which makes us the first city in the Americas to receive air bombardments. Luckily, those were thrown by hand and had little impact on any military strategic targets. As for surcharges, here I have a really nice chart where on the top we have one of the original or unsurcharged stamp of a 1923 issue showing President Dionisio de Herrera. And from that stamp, connected with yellow lines, we have 9 different single surcharges or overprints. And with purple lines, we have 4 overprints on overprinted stamps. Therefore, from one stamp, we have 13 different surcharges and overprints. Some people find this a little bit upsetting, trying to identify all of those stamps. We here in Honduras, we find it challenging. If we're talking about Honduran Philately, we do have to talk about airmail, especially the 1925 airmail stamps. They have a little history. For example, the person who initiated the airmail was a doctor, a US doctor by the name of Thomas Pounds, which is on the upper left stamp. He got an airplane, which is on the center stamp, and he had a printer, which we see on the right by the name of Carl Snow, which actually was a missionary who had a little hand press printing, like the one on the bottom. And he made the stamps, he overprinted some stamps for airmail usage. Originally, Dr. Pounds was to receive a new set of stamps, but the government told them we have no money, so overprint some remainders of obsolete stamps. And the first airmail service of Honduras was between the city of Tegucigalpa and the port of Puerto Cortes on the north, as you can see on the map on the bottom. The stamps were printed in blocks of 12, like the ones that you see here. And here we have an airplane of that airmail service. We have some covers of the early airmails. And if we're talking about Honduran Philately, we have to talk about the stamp known as the Black Honduras. It is known this way because it received a surcharge in black ink with the word Aerocorreo and the number 25. So it's airmail and 2525 for 25 cents. And they were removing the 10 centavos value of that stamp, and now it was a 25 airmail stamp. At one time, the Black Honduras was even more expensive than the inverted jenny. There were only 2 copies known of the Black Honduras. However, many years ago, one of those copies was auctioned in New York City, and apparently the buyer forgot the stamp in a taxi cab or at a restaurant, and the stamp was never recovered. In the year 2012, This stamp that you're seeing right now was auctioned by Cherrystone. And if you attended the New York World Stamp Show in 2016, you had the opportunity of seeing the Black Honduras. I am fortunate to say that I'm one of the few Hondurans who have actually seen it. This was presented by Mystic Stamp Company, who was the owner at the time of the stamp. There you see with the arrow where the Black Honduras was on that stamp show. On the top, you have a photograph that I took of the stamp. And there I'm shaking hands with Mr. Don Sundman of Mystic Stamp, who had a very beautiful presentation of Honduran airmails. Here we see a poster of interesting information, and even some booklets were handed out freely for people who were interested on the history of these stamps. The only thing that we know now is that Mystic Stamp sold the Black Honduras and others. And so right now we don't know who the new owner is, and we don't know when we will see the Black Honduras again, or when will it come out to market. Mystic sold its Black Honduras and collection. We presume that it was the material that you see there behind me in the photo, and other material that we believe was purchased by them on this auction in 2012. If you have any of the 1925 Honduran airmail, we always recommend people to have them expertise. And you can do this at the APS or the Philately Foundation. You can also do this at the Royal Philatelic Society of London. And we had Mr. Brian Moorhouse, who unfortunately is no longer with us. He was an expert on these stamps as well. Then the airmail service of 1925 in Honduras only lasted about a year and a half. Then it came back in 1929 with the FAM mails. If you collect US air routes, you know a lot of the FAM or foreign air mails. Honduras, for its geographical location, was a mandatory pass for the FAM 5 route between Miami and Canal Zone, or the FAM 8 from Texas to Central America through Mexico. Here we have some interesting airmail covers of Honduras from different time periods. The one on the lower right is an exceptional piece. It's one of the few letters from Honduras flown on the Graf Zeppelin. This was sent to Lakehurst, and from Lakehurst to Germany, flown on the Graf Zeppelin. Extremely rare material. The other covers that you see are very interesting, all of them first flights. I collect Honduran airmail, that's why I'm showing a lot of airmail material. Unfortunately, I do not have the Graf Zeppelin cover. Now, between 1940 and 2020, if we see any catalog of Honduran stamps, we use Scott for convenience, you will notice that most of our stamps are commemorative to local events, heads of state, anniversaries of Honduran events, things like that. Some people find this a problem when collecting Honduras because it might not be of your interest if you're not Honduran. However, since I am Honduran, I'm really interested on those events, and many people here do as well. One thing that we noticed, and I want to share with you, is the fact that the USA is quite popular on Honduran stamps. Honduras and the US have had a very friendly relationship for many, many years, and that is shown on our stamps as well. For example, We have a stamp on the upper left for the anniversary of the US Constitution. Then we have two stamps showing a portrait of FDR. Those were made after his death. Interesting fact on these stamps is that the one on the top was made first. As you can see, FDR doesn't look that healthy on that stamp. He seems a little bit sick. And there were some protests regarding that. And another stamp was made with an FDR redrawn. The one on the bottom, you see a healthy FDR. On the bottom, we have a beautiful souvenir sheet with Abe Lincoln. Those were made for the 150th anniversary of Abe Lincoln. The 1 cent stamp in green, if you go to the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, and you go to the little museum that is on the bottom of the memorial, you will find a very large reproduction of that stamp. It was a big surprise to me to visit the Lincoln Memorial, going to the little museum on the bottom, and find a large reproduction of this stamp. This souvenir shows many aspects of Lincoln's life. For example, on the 3 cent, we have the Gettysburg address. On the 10 cents, it's a creepy one, Lincoln being shot. The 25 cent is Lincoln's log cabin where he was born. On the 1 lempiras stamp, Lincoln freeing the slaves. And the 5 lempiras is the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. On the upper right, we have some overprints. As you can see, we have overprints again. On some of the official Lincoln stamps, and they were overprinted in memoriam John F. Kennedy, November 22nd, 1963. These were made short after JFK's assassination. And we believe that's why no new stamps were made. The post office quickly made those overprints. And on the bottom, we have another overprint, which reads in memoriam Robert F. Kennedy. The original stamp for that was issued some years after JFK's assassination. And when Bobby Kennedy was killed, those stamps were selected to overprint them. I believe that was the right choice to use those stamps for the RFK overprint. Honduras sometimes in absence of new stamps for an event makes propaganda postmarks. Here we will only see a few, but Honduras has plenty of propaganda postmarks for many events. Here we will only see 6. For example, this was issued when an arbitration was actually fulfilled. This arbitration was the border between Honduras and Nicaragua, which was ruled by King Alphonse XIII of Spain and then ratified at The Hague. Then we have a propaganda postmark for the Diamond Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II, a propaganda mark for the royal wedding of Prince William and Catherine Middleton, one for the visit of Vice President Joe Biden, another one for the visit of Queen Letizia of Spain, and one to commemorate the proclamation of King Philip VI of Spain. Some of these postmarks, the modern ones, were actually an idea of our Philatelic Federation. We gave them to the post office in order to mark those events, just to make things a little bit more interesting. But there are also other postmarks for census, for anniversaries, and those are hard, sometimes are hard to find and interesting to look at also. Here we see one of the three last, or most recent, I should say, stamp issues of Honduras. Now our stamps have a variety of topics, for example, pets above, local foods on the lower left, or nature and indigenous people on the lower right. And actually, the printing quality has improved a little. If you decide to collect Honduras, we recommend you to, if possible, get the magazine that we issue, which is called Honduras Philatelica. This is given to all of our members, and our federation, the Federación Filatélica de la República de Honduras, was actually created in 1973. We have legal entities since 1974, and we try to keep this publication running twice a year. We make our magazine with a lot of effort, but you can find a lot of information regarding Honduran Philately that you won't find elsewhere. Here you have our mailing address, our email, and our Facebook page. So if possible, please like us on Facebook. And if you're interested in becoming a member of our federation and receive our magazine, our fee is $12 per year. And if you decide that you want to learn a little bit more about Latin American philately, we also recommend you to subscribe to the Mi Oficina Philatelic Society YouTube channel. This group actually was formed as a social group during international stamp exhibits, mostly of Latin American philatelists. However, since right now everybody's on lockdown due to the pandemic, we decided to gather via Zoom, and eventually we decided to do some presentations and record our presentations. And if you subscribe to our channel, or if you visit our channel, you will see excellent presentations on Latin American philately. Most of them are in Spanish, some are in Portuguese, and a few in English. But you will find that this is an excellent resource if you're interested in Latin American philately. So don't forget to subscribe. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the APS YouTube channel. And I hope you enjoyed my presentation. I'm ready for any questions that you have. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastico, Mauricio. Thank you. Thank you. And friends, we will be taking questions. We will, why don't you go ahead and screen share, Mr. Mejia, just in case friends have some questions regarding certain slides.
Okay, perfect. I'll do that. And before my presentation is shared, I just want to thank all of the people present. I know many philatelists are here, also friends for many years. Even I have seen some of my school friends who are attending, or the friends of the Mi Oficina.
Oh, Mauricio's getting frozen as he's saying thank you to everyone. He took every fail-safe precaution. He's the most prepared philatelist that I have ever met. So thank you so much for joining us, and everyone on the call. Oh, Mauricio is frozen. Well, I would like to say, as we fingers
You're
crossed.
having,
There you are.
you're having the beginning of a storm here in Tegucigalpa, so that affects my internet.
Hey, well, stay safe, please. Okay, so I did want to say thank you so much for talking about when you said always expertise your Honduran airmail. I thought that
Yes.
that was a great plug for the APS. So thank you for that. All right, so let's dive in here, and let's dive in, and please use the Q&A, friends, for any questions. I know that people tend to use the chat box, but if you could, please use the question and answer. Here we go. I like looking up facts about the people who appear on stamps. Sometimes it's hard to find any information about them. Is there any such thing as an encyclopedia hondureña for people to look up historical information? And yes, I really like airmail overprints and recent Honduran commemoratives.
Okay, there is some information on Honduran famous people out there. However, most of that will be in Spanish, and I believe you might have some hard times finding that in the States. Most of it will be here in Honduras. However, if you are, let's say, doing a research, maybe at Library of Congress, you'll obviously find everything of Honduras over there, or other universities in the US that I know have some Latin American section in their libraries. You might find something of Honduras, but it's a little bit challenging to find of our people elsewhere.
Thank you. Fabulous presentation. Thank you so much. How do you suggest a newcomer to Honduran Philately get started?
Okay, for newcomers, first you should decide if you're going to collect the whole postal era of Honduras from 1865 to present day, or you can only do for maybe from the airmail period and on, or maybe just since the return of democracy in Honduras since 1982 to present day. You decide what you want to collect. If you decide to collect everything, which is possible, you will have some hard time with the early airmails. However, besides that, everything in Honduras, you can get it on the philately market.
And I'm going to have you get ready, just so you know, for a question regarding your slides, but we'll work before then. Has anyone done an inventory of the 1925, 25 or 25 centavo airmail stamp?
Okay, there has been some studies regarding those. There have been even books. There is a really good book about the Black Honduras, to be specific, that was made by the Collectors Club many years ago. And there are there's some literature regarding the airmails. Most of that is printed on our magazine, Honduras Philatélica. I know that we send this to the APS library. We also send it to the Philatelic Foundation. And I believe the Postal Museum in Washington, DC receives a copy. But there aren't that many books out there that mention all of this 1925 airmails. And there is not like an inventory of all of those stamps. The only thing that it's a fact is that there aren't that many out there. The counterfeits overpass the original ones.
And speaking of the counterfeits, let's go ahead and go back to slides 24 to 26, por favor. please. So we're going to go back to slides 24 through 26. I'm going to try
24.
and I'm going to try to
24,
combine
25.
a few preguntas, a few questions here. So here we go. Would you please show the screens on the counterfeits again? I believe it was 24 through 26. So I'm assuming that this person
Yes, they should be right now 24, 25, and 26.
Perfect.
Here we have the first ones. Let me know if you see them.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
That's fine. Okay, perfect.
That's fine. I think that the person wanted to just have a look at them.
Okay, I can do some little explanation. There
Please.
are for this one's four fakes. The explanation of this, actually, whoever made that question, if you can take a screenshot, it'll be perfect as a reference material. For some reason, philately market, well, I mentioned that in my presentation, but most of the ones that you find in the market are fakes, unfortunately. Especially if you get them from European dealers, and I am 100% sure that they don't know that those are fakes, but we believe that these ones were printed, the fake ones, in Europe, and it's quite easy to find forged material in Europe of those stamps, of these ones and the locomotive issue.
Let's see. I'm trying to combine some of these ones related to the counterfeits. You mentioned fake stamps and that stamps were stolen. Are you aware of any mail robbery covers?
No, as mail robbery covers. What there has been some fake covers. So those covers were prepared for philatelists using forged stamps, fake postmarks, that exists. The government did a really good job making control marks to prevent the usage of of stolen stamps. And the only fake covers are the ones that were made just to be sold on the philatelic market, which you can also see a lot, especially in the 1925 airmails and on the permítase control mark. You can see a lot of fakes.
What is the best reference work for identifying Honduran counterfeits?
Okay, there are some articles on our magazine, Honduras Philatélica, and basically that is the place to look if you want to know, if you want to identify those counterfeits. Since we are a small group of philatelists, we want to have more books out there, but that's a really hard work. And that's one of our limitations, is there's very few people who actually collect Honduras, and it's fewer the ones who actually study the stamps. There are some, I believe there's a website, if you search on Google Honduras stamps, there's a website of a philatelist in the US who is dedicated to Honduras, and he has some notes on some of the fakes. But the information on fakes is quite limited. The good news is that most of the fakes are poor quality made, so it's easy to compare them once you know how to recognize a good one from a bad one.
Excellent. And we have reached our time limit. Mauricio, would you mind sharing some sort of a contact information? I know that you provided one on a screen,
Yes.
but I think some of our friends would like to send some questions your way. Friends, well,
Yes,
you're welcome to send an email to me, Heidi@stamps.org. That's Heidi@stamps.org, or Mr. Mejia has his so graciously shared his contact information.
You can contact me to the Federation's email, which you have it on the screen. You can take a screenshot right now. And I manage that email, so I'll be happy to answer all of your questions.
And you could probably like the Facebook page, right?
Yes, as well. Yes, please do like us on Facebook. We publish almost daily. And yep, I really hope that you enjoy Honduran Philately and that you decide to collect our country.
Well, I'm not known for being shy, Mauricio, so I can already see a parte dos. So I feel the enthusiasm from the chat and the amount of questions. So thanks so much, friends, for joining and for sharing your love of diversity and wanting to know more about international philately. It's just a great way to explore the world. And before I do bid adieu and say thanks, I would like to mention Mr. Mejia was a little bit humble, but that philatelic group that he was talking about that's been meeting on Zoom, Mi Oficina, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, they've been meeting for, what is it? Over 150 days, friends. So that really embodies the philatelic passion and that connection and continuing to learn and making the best out of a bad situation. So I really think that that's remarkable. Anyway, I'd like to thank everyone for joining me. Let's give Mr. Mejia a round of applause. We can hear you through the internets, but thank you so much. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to send them my way or over to Mr. Mejia. Thank you again for joining us all the way from Tegucigalpa and for enriching our philatelic understanding of Honduras. Today's Stamp Chat was sponsored by the American Philatelic Research Library. APS members can borrow materials and request philatelic research support. Visit stamplibrary.org to learn more about the APRL. You can also subscribe to the Philatelic Literature Review, the library's quarterly journal. Your subscription helps fund the library and all of the services we provide our patrons. Have a favorite philatelic book and want to make a contribution that will support the APRL and provide a lasting legacy? Learn about the APRL's Adopt a Book program by visiting stamps.org/adopt-a-book. For more Stamp Chats, visit and subscribe to the APS YouTube channel, where you can find over 60 presentations on philately. Use the comment box below the video to keep the conversation going. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next Stamp Chat. Until then, find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and of course on stamps.org. Connect, collect, APS, social since 1886. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye.